Hello, my people. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Luana from luanarose.com. Here on my channel, I talk about all things nervous system health, relational health, and healing trauma. If you're new here, thank you for clicking on this video. Leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. This video is short and right to the point. Let's start by defining what self-regulation is. Self-regulation is our ability to self-organize our physiological states, emotions, behaviors, thoughts, and ultimately stressors in life. Ideally, this self-regulation leads to positive results, positive health, optimal well-being, caring relationships, and success in life. Self-regulation underlies everything we do in life. If you've been around my channel for a while, you've probably heard me talk about our physiological response to stress, meaning that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. So self-regulation is our ability to self-organize that response. Dr. Gabor Mate puts it in a beautiful way. He says in his book, When the Body Says No, when we are well self-regulated, people are the most capable of interacting fruitfully with others in a community and of nurturing children who will also grow into self-regulated adults. Anything that interferes with that natural agenda threatens the organism's chance for long-term survival. Besides Dr. Gabor Mate's whole human, holistic approach to the work that he does and his view on self-regulation, I think it's really important to acknowledge the last part that he said there about self-regulation actually affects our long-term survival and our children's long-term survival. So what happens when we don't have well self-regulated adults or a well self-regulated capacity in our own system? Well, the DSM from the American Psychiatric Association says that folks with low self-regulation or dysregulated systems can experience things like mood disorders, so we have depression or mania in there. They can also experience emotional disorders, so things like anxiety disorders, PTSD, insomnia, panic disorders, phobia, and CPTSD. So even from a clinical perspective, self-regulation is very important because it underlies how we show up in life, how we experience life, how we experience relationships, the ability to learn, the ability to connect with others. When we have a significant amount of dysregulation or a lack of self-regulation on board, we're going to need coping mechanisms, or some people call it management strategies or defensive accommodations, basically to act as a fake self-regulator. So we can see coping mechanisms as alcohol, overworking, addiction to social media, addiction to gambling, smoking, pornography. So why do we need regulation? Why do we need to be able to self-regulate? Well, it really helps with our cognitive functioning and our fine motor skills. So if you've ever heard of kids or students in university struggling with learning, that most likely means that there's some dysregulation going on that's holding them back from that. So cognitive, higher brain functioning and manual small and fine motor skills versus a lack in that and a struggle with that. We can also look at self-regulation being a foundation for intentional living. Folks that seem to be able to have a thought and create it and make it happen, whether that's a goal, a business, an idea to travel or build a house. Intentional living versus reactive living, when we're reacting to our surroundings, our environmental or social economical environment. Reactive living really is a reflection of dysregulation within ourselves, our physiological states, our mind, and our body. Self-regulation really allows us to be creative in our problem solving. It's that person at the job that really can move through obstacles in ways that probably other people can't, or maybe faster. So creative problem solving really is a marker of good self-regulation, whereas on the other hand, if we're always bumping up against the same problems, whether that's in our daily lives or in relationships, it can be determined as a sign of some dysregulation there. Another one is transformation. When we're having some healthy self-regulation on board, it's easy to change and transform into the human that we're meant to be, that we were put here on earth to be, rather than the opposite of that, which can be coercion, manipulation, and avoiding self-growth and self-development. Ultimately, self-regulation allows us to have healthy relationships. It attracts other self-regulated humans into our field, and we're able to have healthy self-regulation and co-regulation with another. And ultimately, it's the bottom line for our health, our optimal health, which leads me to how the heck do we develop self-regulation? As Dr. Gabor Mate hinted in the quote that I read you from his book, When the Body Says No, in childhood, one of the biggest tasks developmentally that happens, it's supposed to happen automatically, is self-regulation. And how do we develop that self-regulation in childhood? So as babies develop self-regulation through co-regulation. So especially in the first in utero to 6 months of life, the baby's sense of safety and sense of well-being, as well as their ability to regulate their stress physiology, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, is dependent on their caregiver, is dependent on an external source. So that starts with co-regulation. Very important. We need to co-regulate with a well-regulated parent or caregiver in order to learn ourselves as babies self-regulation. So it's kind of like, did the chicken or the egg come first? Well, in this case, co-regulation comes before self-regulation. And in childhood, some attributes that really help with self-regulation are security, a safe and predictable environment, attunement. Attunement is open, accepting listening. When a baby is developing who they are in the world, an attuned caregiver will reflect the baby's experience. And later on in adulthood, we still need that attunement in order to build self-regulation or repair regulation that never happened. So attunement creates self-regulation. Misattunement creates dysregulation and more ruptures within the relational field. Lastly, soothing. We need soothing in order to build our capacity to self-regulate. So as children, it's essential to have these 3 things in place: security, attunement, and soothing. And if we didn't get those, we can build that for ourselves as adults. It doesn't mean that it's irreparable. Self-regulation is always something that anyone can do at any time for yourself. Coming back to the bridge between self-regulation and health. When we're babies, right, we can't think. Our higher thinking brain isn't formed yet. So that phase from in utero to 6 months, for example, is when the baby learns how to self-regulate by being in the presence of a well-regulated adult, coming back to Dr. Gabor Mate's quote. And things that start to self-regulate as a baby, for example, are our stress physiology, the way our heart rate can go up and go down and regulate itself automatically, part of the autonomic nervous system. Our breathing, it regulates our respiratory system. Our body temperature, it regulates our sleep and wake cycles. And ultimately, healthy self-regulation has our lower brain, our brainstem area, integrated and connected with our midbrain, our limbic brain, that emotional part of us, and our higher brain, our higher functioning, logical, meaning, and solution making part of our brain. So when we have healthy self-regulation on board, those three parts of our brain are really working optimally. And on the flip side of that, of course, if we have a significant amount of dysregulation, we're going to struggle with integrating these parts of our brain and, of course, our experience in life. So before we end, let me give you one quick example of how dysregulation can happen early on in life, which later leads to health problems as an adult, which I commonly see in my practice one-on-one as well as my programs. So coming back to Dr. Gabor Mate's quote, linking the bridge between well-regulated adults raising well-regulated children, is that if our parents are not well-regulated themselves due to their own histories, their own trauma, or the circumstances, the social economical circumstances that we're raised in, a child can only regulate as much as their parents are regulated. So, for example, if I grew up with an anxious mom, if my mom kind of was emotionally sensitive, and not sensitive in a negative way, but dysregulated, like when she go high, she goes high. When she go low, she goes low. And kind of her system responds in these little quick bursts of anxiousness and nervousness. Then as a child, my little system mirrors that and says, oh, this is the way I am, and this is the way I need to be in the world. So I grew up with that same amount of dysregulation that she has. So anxious caregiver, mom, dad, grandma, raising a child creates this cycle of dysregulation that we see throughout generations. So I hope that was helpful and relatable, because there's so many people that I work with that had decent upbringings. Their parents loved them, they had a roof over their head and food on the table, and somehow they still don't feel quite right inside. And generally that's because of misattunement that happens, and it's also because of dysregulation in our own parents' nervous system. No matter how old or how young you are, we all had someone that mirrored and taught us how to regulate ourselves. So all hope is not lost. You can always learn how to build your self-regulation for yourself, and that's what my work is all about. So make sure you stick around my channel and check out my other videos, or go on over to my website luanarose.com to get yourself some help in a program or one-on-one work. So I want to leave you with this quote, another quote from Dr. Gabor Mate before I say goodbye. And in Dr. Gabor Mate's words, he says, give yourself as best you can what your parents would have loved to grant you, but probably could not. Full-hearted attention, full-minded awareness, and compassion. Make gifting yourself with these qualities your daily practice. So my good human, thank you so much for being here. If you like this video, make sure you give it a like, thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from and if you learned something new in this video today. Take good care. See you in the next video.